Friends, welcome back my YouTube channel. If you want to watch the super hit movie Exterritorial in full HD, then first of all, give this video a like, and if you are visiting our channel for the first time, then subscribe to this channel. The name of the movie we are going to discuss in today's video is Exterritorial. So we will give you information about how and where you will get to watch Exterritorial film officially. Apart from this, we will give you a detailed look at the pre-production, post-production, budget, box office collection, and filming of this movie. A detailed review of the movie will also be given in this video where we will explain the story of this movie in detail. We will also discuss the cast and casting performance of the movie. Apart from this, information about the music department and technical department will also be given. Because of this video is going to be very interesting and entertaining. So you must watch this video till the end. And if you haven't liked this video yet, then like this video now and subscribe to this channel. So, let's start the video. Exterritorial is a 2025 German action thriller film directed and written by Christian Zübert and starring Jeanne Goursaud, Dougray Scott, and Lera Abova. The film was released on Netflix on April 30th, 2025. It is about a former Special Forces soldier with PTSD, Goursaud, who is determined to find her young son after he mysteriously disappears inside the U.S. consulate in Germany. Plot: Sarah Wolf is a former Special Forces soldier who served in Afghanistan until 2017. She was the only survivor of an ambush in which 8 soldiers were killed. Sarah and her young son, Josh, visit the U.S. consulate in Frankfurt to apply for a work visa. During their lengthy stay, she leaves Josh in a playroom. When she returns, he is gone. Sarah asks Regional Security Officer Eric Kinch and Sergeant Donovan for help. According to Donovan, Sarah entered the consulate alone and no child was checked in, and the surveillance footage also shows only Sarah without her son. Sarah contacts the German police, but German authorities have no authority in American extraterritorial territory. Her mother, Anja, does not believe her either. She suspects that Sarah has not taken her post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, pills. Sarah is deemed to be having a psychiatric episode and she is asked to leave the consulate. Instead, Sarah goes into hiding in the building and searches for Josh. There she meets Verena, who has been held captive at the consulate for almost 2 months. Verena offers to help her find Josh in return for helping her to leave the consulate. Sarah finds a bag of illegal drugs in an employee's locker at the consulate, so she suspects Josh may have been kidnapped because he witnessed the transaction. After consulate security finds Sarah, Kinch injects her with a sedative and she falls unconscious. When she wakes up, Consul General Deborah Allen is at her bedside. She was contacted by Sarah's mother, who is concerned about Sarah's PTSD and her delusions following her deployment to Afghanistan, during which Joshua's father was also killed. Later, Sarah is freed by Verena, whose real name is Kira Volkova. Her father was a Belarusian dissident and was killed by the Russian government. Kira fled to the U.S. Embassy in Minsk. The CIA had brought her to Frankfurt. Kira wants to go to Boston to see her mother. And from there, by sharing incriminating data about Russian crimes on a USB stick, she hopes to free other dissidents. Sarah has a job offer with a security firm in the U.S. that is recruiting female ex-soldiers. She discovers that Kinch is behind the offer as a ruse to get her into the consulate and kidnap her, as he was also in Afghanistan. Sarah had received a video from a journalist showing Kinch meeting with a Taliban militant. According to the journalist, Kinch is corrupt and was responsible for tipping off the Taliban and enabling them to ambush Sarah's group. Sarah launches a diversion so Kira can escape to the U.S. via France. Kinch admits to Sarah that he kidnapped Josh and tampered with the surveillance footage. As Sarah was the last surviving witness to the Afghanistan incident, and Kinch felt threatened by the journalist's evidence, so his plan was to get Sarah concerned about her son and let her run amok in the consulate so he could shoot her in self-defense. Sarah kidnaps Kinch's daughter, Aileen, and takes her to a safe room. She initially tries to trade her for Josh, but then changes her mind and releases her. Sarah later secretly records Kinch's confession on Aileen's digital recorder. Kinch himself was a soldier and felt unsupported by the military in dealing with trauma, as well as financially disadvantaged. Therefore, he made a deal with the Taliban to sell information and improve his financial situation. After Sarah is shot and injured by Kinch, Josh is freed. 8 weeks later, Sarah calls Kira. Kinch is now in custody in the U.S. Donovan and the man at the check-in desk were also involved in Kinch's kidnapping plan. Sarah travels to the U.S. with Josh and plans to meet Kira there. Cast: Jeanne Goursaud as Sarah Wolf, a former Special Forces soldier struggling from PTSD. Dougray Scott as Eric Kinch, a consulate security officer. Lera Abova as Irina, a refugee hiding at the consulate whose real name is Kira Volkova. Kayode Akunyemi as Sergeant Donovan. Annabelle Mandeng as Deborah Allen. Lara Babalola as a service manager information desk. Godfrey Egbonde as Evan production. The film was produced by Constantin Film, with Kerstin Schmidbauer as producer and Oliver Bourbon as executive producer. Filming took place in Vienna with the support of FISA Plus and ended in late 2023. Filming took place at, among other locations, the Altenstrasse University Center, the site of the Vienna University of Economics and Business from 1982 to 2013. Matthias Putsch was the cameraman. Sarah Baroni wrote the music. Whaley Kristen was in charge of editing, and Cornelia von Braun and Lisa Stutzky were in charge of casting. Heike Lange was the set designer, Anna Zeidelhuber the costume designer, Herbert Verdino the sound designer, and Aurora Hummer the makeup designer. Katharina Haudum served as intimacy coordinator, and Florian Hotz as stunt coordinator. Release: Exterritorial, released by Netflix on April 30th, 2025. Reception: critical response. The film received mostly positive reviews. Writing for the New York Times, Robert Daniels noted that the oppressively white and bright setting, the psychological angst felt by Sarah and Zübert's insistence on long takes, makes Exterritorial succeed as a frustrating fight for recognition. Jake D. wrote on movieweb.de that Exterritorial is a character-driven redemption story in the guise of a die-hard-style actioner. Yet for Sarah, it's less about avenging external enemies and more about exterminating her inner demons. With its undeniable entertainment value, it's easy to see why the movie is so popular. Viewer: According to Flix Patrol, the film reached #1 on the Netflix charts in 79 countries on May 2nd, 2025. After 6 weeks, the film ranks on number 5 of the Netflix all-time top 10 with over 83 million views. It is the most successful German film on Netflix ever. Plot: when a soldier's son vanishes at a U.S. consulate, she illegally remains on the premises to search for him, unknowingly entangling herself in a dangerous conspiracy. Review: Next up on my Netflix watch list was Exterritorial, a German action film where an ex-Solider called Sarah Wolf, Jeanne Goursaud, and her son Josh are moving to America. They go to the American consulate and Josh suddenly disappears. The seemingly kind Eric Kinch, Dougray Scott, tries to console Sarah, but is he a good guy or a villain? Throughout the film, we're wondering if this is all going on in Sarah's head, as she suffers from PTSD, which keeps us guessing. On the action front, there are some brutal fight scenes to keep things moving. However, the ending is a little underwhelming. This is one of those movies that once you've watched it once and know all the twists, it wouldn't really warrant future viewings. It is still mostly well-paced, and Sarah is sympathetic, having already lost her husband in battle. Dougray Scott is a revelation, switching between accents and keeping us on our toes about whether he can be trusted or not. Netflix continues to release original movies and TV shows at a regular cadence. The streamer recently released titles like The Electric State, 2025, and The Life List, 2025, with Havoc starring Tom Hardy marking one of Netflix's most recent films. Havoc reviews weren't glowing from critics or audiences, but the gritty action movie has been a big viewership hit, topping the charts upon its release on April 25th. Though Havoc and many of the streamer's other big titles are presented in English, Netflix is a platform with a global reach, meaning non-English titles continue to be an important part of the service's offerings. Recently, Netflix released non-English titles like I Hostage 2025, Demon City 2025, Counterattack 2025, Bullet Train Explosion 2025, and The Eternaut 2025. Now, another recent non-English title has broken through. Exterritorial has just become a major Netflix global hit, beating some major titles. Directed by Christian Zübert, the action thriller film stars Jeanne Goursaud as Sarah Wolf, a former Special Forces soldier who illegally searches a U.S. consulate after her son goes missing, finding herself wrapped up in a dangerous conspiracy. Goursaud is joined in the Exterritorial cast by Dougray Scott, Lera Abova, Kayode Akunyemi, Annabelle Mandeng, and Samia Hoffman, among others, with the action playing out in both English and German. New data from Netflix now reveals that Exterritorial is the most popular non-English movie on Netflix for the week of April 28th, May 4. The bilingual movie racked up an impressive 38.3 million views and 69.6 million hours viewed, beating Havoc, which leads the English language movies chart with 26.5 million views and 47.3 million hours viewed. Exterritorial is the #1 movie in 74 countries this week, including the US, Canada, Portugal, Spain, Lebanon, Singapore, and South Africa. Check out the full top 10 list for non-English movies below. Exterritorial may be a major viewership hit on Netflix, but the reception to the movie hasn't been glowing from audiences. There aren't enough reviews for a Rotten Tomatoes critics score to have taken shape, but the audience score is a lackluster 43% from over 100 reviews. It's a similar story on IMDb, where the movie has a 5.810 score from over 5,000 users. Clearly, this mixed reception isn't deterring new viewers, however, as Exterritorial enjoys a healthy lead over the second-place title. It's interesting to note that Havoc 2 has been met with a mixed response, but has also succeeded in terms of viewership. It's a similar story for other top 10 titles as well, with the Eye Hostage reception earning the film an 18% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. Clearly, Netflix is good at getting its new titles in front of subscribers, even when the responses to these titles aren't always glowing. Netflix's new 2025 action thriller has become one of the streamer's top 5 most popular non-English movies of all time. The platform has seen global success in non-English films, with several action titles on Netflix having reached massive viewership and receiving critical acclaim. The top-performing non-English titles have more than 100 million views. Inspired by Norwegian folklore about an ancient troll, the 2022 monster movie Troll, directed by Roar Uthaug, tells a tale about the crisis when an ancient troll is awakened by an explosion. The film's smash success has led to a sequel titled Troll 2, which will explore a new threat to the armed forces. Similarly, the French shark thriller Under Paris, which had 102 million views within 3 months of its release, also received a sequel, with Berenice Bejo and Nassim Layes reprising their roles as a marine biologist and a river police commander. Now, a new action thriller is climbing the charts after its release 2 months ago. The new crime movie, Exterritorial, stars Jeanne Goursaud as a former Special Forces soldier who struggles with PTSD while trying to uncover the truth behind her son's disappearance in a U.S. consulate. Since its release on Netflix on April 30th, the movie has achieved streaming success. In less than 2 weeks, it broke the record for the most-watched German Netflix original film and has landed on the platform's top 10 non-English chart of all time. Now, Exterritorial has become the #5 most popular non-English movie of all time on Netflix, with more than 83 million views, following Nowhere in 4th place at 85 million views and Society of the Snow's 98 million viewing record in 3rd. The top of the chart is currently occupied by Troll, which has 103 million views. Exterritorial's reviews have polarized movie lovers and critics. Many praise the film's tension-building and highly entertaining action sequences, while others pointed out its unpolished production and the lack of a convincing plot. It seems that despite its mixed reception, the film still manages to achieve global-level success. The fact that the action thriller is now one of the top 5 most popular non-English movies proves its massive appeal. On the other hand, the movie's popularity still can't compete with any of the top 10 English-speaking titles. The number 10 spot occupied by We Can All Be Heroes has a 137 million views, which is more than the top 1 non-English movie of all time. The most popular movie of all time on Netflix is currently the mixed-reviewed Red Notice, with more than 239 million views. Nevertheless, Exterritorial is clearly a major success for Netflix, as the streamer continues its global outreach with plenty of international content. Once in a while, a non-English language comes to Netflix that blows the viewers' minds, and fans have found the movie of the season. German-language movie Exterritorial has dethroned Tom Hardy's action-packed feature Havoc in its 2nd week. Exterritorial is an action feature starring Jeanne Goursaud as a mother and former soldier whose son vanished inside a U.S. consulate, and she does everything to find him. The movie has been at the top spot in 74 countries. In contrast, Hardy's Havoc, another long-awaited action flick, enjoyed the top spot for a week and is now on number 2. The film, directed and written by Christian Zübert, follows a former Special Forces soldier, Lera Goursaud, who is turning a new leaf as she heads to the U.S. Consulate General in Frankfurt to obtain a work visa. She and her son, Josh Rickson Guy da Silva, are planning a move to America, but while the pair are at the consulate, Josh goes missing without a trace. Sarah realizes something is amiss when she's interviewed by Regional Security Officer Eric Dougray Scott and Sergeant Donovan Coyote Akinyemi. In order to uncover what's really going on and to find her son at all costs, Sarah uses every ounce of her military training to fight her way through the labyrinthine consulate building and outmaneuver her adversaries. The feature is full of epic action while maintaining an emotional core. Despite a 44% Rotten Tomatoes score, the flick is going strong on streaming charts. It has a slew of talents, including Goursaud as a former soldier and single mother, Sarah Wolf, Dougray Scott as Eric Kinch, a regional security officer at the U.S. Consulate, Lera Abova as Irina, Coyote Akinyemi as a security officer, Sergeant Donovan, Annabelle Mandang as Deborah Allen, and Rickson Guy da Silva as Sarah's son, Josh, among others. Fans were eager to see Hardy's collaboration with director Gareth Evans, but despite good action and a thrilling plot, the movie failed to impress its audience. It stayed atop the streaming charts during its first week, but soon saw its downfall. Interestingly, Havoc is now Hardy's lowest-rated movie. It follows a cop, Hardy, who, after a drug deal gone wrong, fights his way through a corrupt city's criminal underworld to save a politician's son. Also starring are Luis Guzman, Yeo Yan Yan, Timothy Oliphant, Forrest Whitaker, and many more. Exterritorial is streaming on Netflix. You can check out the trailer above and stay tuned to Collider for more such updates. The choreography is slick and believably performed. Goursaud is a pretty small and very conventionally attractive lady, but I was a little bit terrified of her by the end of this. It's all good stuff. So, what's the problem? We'll get to that. First, a bit more plot context is necessary. So, Sora is traumatized from that Afghanistan mission and still can't hear a helicopter pass by without falling into a trance. But she's determined to keep herself in shape. AQ Josh newcomer, Rex and Gua Silva, whose father was killed on that doomed mission. To this end, she has taken a job in the US, which requires a brief visit to the consulate to apply for a work visa. Simple, bureaucratic stuff. Annoying, but easy. Until Sora turns her back for a minute while Josh is in the building's play area and he promptly disappears. Sora is adamant that Josh has been taken, but Eric, who turns up to help manage the situation, insists that he was never there in the first place. Sora takes pills to manage her psyche, or she's supposed to. Anyway, we know about her trauma. Nobody seems to have seen Josh. These people can't all be lying, can they? Well, yes, and that's the problem I was talking about. It's same. Vittoria has no interest in sustaining the ambiguity. It becomes obvious virtually immediately that Sora is being gaslit, and from there things proceed in the manner of a typical action movie. And that's fine since the action is good, and the payoff is worth waiting for, albeit completely predictable. But one can't help but feel like more could have been made of the premise. Still, it's difficult to overstate how much heavy lifting the choreography is doing, even in a stew of increasingly overblown conspiratorial plot turns, which are unraveled thick and fast once Sora teams up with Irina, Lera Abova, Anna, a woman she finds in one of the embassy apartments as a kind of political prisoner for reasons that get their own little subplot. As silly as all this stuff is, it's grounded by the relentless intimacy and immediacy of the action, which is filmed close-up and handheld, and an unusually long takes that deliberately draw attention to how much of this is being performed by the actors and not stunt doubles. Maybe I'm just a sucker for that stuff, but I found it very involving nonetheless, and a cut above the usual action in this kind of fare. And all this is why I'd recommend Exterritorial pretty confidently, despite its third-act descent into melodrama and the preponderance of contrivances and stilt headline readings. It's not trying to be politically contentious or thematically resonant. It's just a set-up, nam-down action movie with an impressive degree of craft. It'll keep you occupied for 90 minutes and will probably leave you pretty satisfied. That's exactly as good as a movie like this needs to be. Lera Goursaud freezes up. She's not quite present anymore. She was at the park with her toddler son and had just finished talking to him about his late father when a helicopter passed overhead, triggering a waking PTSD nightmare that fateful day in Afghanistan. She was a soldier on a doomed mission. The boy's dad, an American, was among the casualties. Sarah was the only survivor. A miracle, perhaps, since she didn't realize she was pregnant until after a man accidentally bumps into her at the park and awakens her from an almost trance-like state, and she instinctively clobbers him and pins him down. Working in special forces makes a person like this 4 years after the incident in the park. We see Sarah working out a hard do of punching and kicking and kneeing and elbowing the air with great intensity. How would it feel if she hit you instead? Not great. I bet there's a big scar on her shoulder. She takes a prescription pill, feels a call from a journalist who wants to talk about the incident in Afghanistan, blows it off. It's probably just too much right now. Besides, she hopes to put all that further in the rear view by moving to the US. She gathers up now 6-year-old Josh Rick and Guy Da Silva, and they head to the US consulate building to apply for her work visa. Hours go by and she's still waiting, and Josh is restless, and she drops him in a nearby children's play area and walks away for just a moment, which is obviously a bad idea because for the brief snatch of time it took for her to fetch a coffee, the kid disappears. She frantically searches, but he's gone. This is the absolute worst feeling a parent could have. This side of the unthinkable, Sora gets help from security and an embassy honcho named Eric Kinch Griscott. And is it me, or are these guys a bit too chilly in demeanor considering the situation? Kinch insists there's no record of the boy checking into the building, which is nonsense because we watched it happen, but this movie never deviates from Sarah's point of view. And don't you dare forget about those pills she took. Pills that help her manage PTSD-derived delusions and psychiatric episodes, right? The German police can't help this technically being US territory. Kinch shows her security cal footage of her in the building with no little boy beside her, which might have been more convincing in a prey world. So now we know this guy probably can't be trusted. But we're a step or two ahead of Sarah, who's still in panic mode, but slowly realizing she's being gaslit. Kinch and his cohorts lock her in a room. And that's the first time they underestimate this angry mama bear who's been separated from her cowbay, and just so happens to be far more dangerous than the average bear. She climbs out windows and jumps off roofs and smashes a skylight into a basement level and soon finds herself swimming with a school of red herrings. Who were those two suspicious people she saw in the hall at the time of Josh's disappearance? Can she trust Lera Abova, who she finds hidden away in a way too quiet wing of the consulate and is willing to quid pro quo with Sora if she helps her escape the building? What's the deal with this duffel bag full of drugs they find? And even more curiously, why hasn't Kinch pulled every alarm in the building in response to a violently capable ex-special ops soldier being on the loose in a high-security government building? Exterritorial is the type of movie that seems reasonably convincing until its protagonist clobbers a guy with the lid of a toilet tank and the guy gets back up to fight some more about 30 seconds later. That's the first ow-ho moment in this film, arriving about a third of the way through to test the tensile strength of our suspension of disbelief. Maintaining the balance of plausibility and OTT violent reverie is the movie's primary struggle. Narratively speaking, Azir nurtures a realistic tone for a while before inching away from the verisimilitude of a more realistic conspiracy thriller, with every passing roundhouse, chokehold, and armbar. Not that this unofficial bait switch, which should really be an issue. We swallow all the ludicrousness of Fayon, wake up purely on the basis of its audacious style and technical proficiency. And so, Exterritorial finds Zübert winning us over. Not with the mawkish sentimentality of its emotional storyline, but with the relentlessly brutal choreography and handheld camera immediacy of its hand-to-hand fight sequences, the likes of which call attention to themselves via the scarcesse of edits. It's the type of flashy look, Mom. No cuts is stuff that easily wins over those of us who've seen far too many films piecing together fragments into action sequences via the editing room, and are therefore more open to accepting plot contrivances and awkward dialogue when they're couched within the breathless exhilaration of very long takes. For self-professed movie-knowers guilty, it's fish in a barrel candy from Oh Baby. We're very easy that way. But a part of my initial struggle with the Exterritorial derives from the harder-edged realistic drama and less likely to indulge any Hollywood silly me, I guess. Sub teases a little with the former, but eventually leans into the latter, showing more Reabornia, and the mission impossibly influences, albeit with a far leaner budget and sense of scale. The plot gets more rickety and the melodrama more mawkish, the deeper into the third act we get, and Zübert's attempt to sustain tension for 109 minutes might work better with the more judicious edit. There's also the nagging sense that the film has nothing to say, be a PTSD is no fun. But, such is the basis of countless action films dating back to Rambo A, and besides making it a ripped from the headlines, political thriller sounds like no fun whatsoever these days. Based on its modest goal to be escapist fare, Exterritorial works just fine. I'm not sure about you, but the reason I don't generally enjoy action movies is that the character motivations happen to be the same in almost every single one. That there is no way something that simple could go so wrong. And that there's only so much you can enjoy watching people beat each other up. Yet, when the action is accompanied by a motivating factor that drives you as an audience to vibe with the thumping sound of drums and get you to root for a side to emerge victorious, then it becomes good cinema. When it comes to women in action cinema, it is rare to see a motivation that doesn't draw from family identity or revenge for sad extraterritorial focuses on the first of those two categories. In this movie, Sarah, an ex-Bandasier soldier, finds herself tearing apart the U.S. consulate in Frankfurt in search of her little son. The woman suffers from PTSD, and soon enough, she's left fending for herself. It feels like everyone in the building is against her. Before I talk about anything else, the action in this movie is solid. If you're a fan of muscular women, you're going to get a good kick out of this one. There are some sequences of fighting the showers and climbing out of windows that are pretty fun to watch, but I can't really say anything else is all that engaging about the film. Extra takes place for the most part in one building, the U.S. consulate. But does it really manage to give us anything interesting with that setting? I personally don't think so. Also, is it natural for a consulate to have so many rooms locked and be so mosaic? I didn't realize they hide fugitives and do drug deals there, but it's good to know, I guess. In truth, it's the kind of film that thinks adding intense music makes a scene tense without doing anything to make the stakes feel realistic. The entire premise is a bit lacking, which is predominantly a Netflix action thriller trope that I'm frankly tired of seeing. I don't understand why those movies can't have more substance in a plot to make the action bits feel more necessary. Don't get me wrong, I also enjoy mindless action movies sometimes, but that's because they appear to be that way from the get-go. With these ones, it's like trying to find a middle ground that doesn't exist, which is why it's more of a disappointment rather than just plain old bad. In terms of performance, the lead actress, Jeanne Goursaud, is excellent as an ex-soldier and present mom with PTSD. You will want to hit the gym the second you look at her sweaty arms at the start of the film. She's got some mean moves, and some of the camera work during the action sequences is interesting. Okay, is it mean to say that Goursaud looks like a budget Tom Selleck because of the mustache? I suppose it is a little bit. It is a little, but hey, he's pretty good in this role, and I quite enjoyed the dynamic between Sora and Eric, especially when it was about being a parent. I think Eric is an interesting character and doesn't necessarily get explored enough before things kick off in the latter half of the film. Though I guess Sora is the protagonist who needs all the attention she can get. Larva is good as Verena, but is almost underused in this nearly negligible role. It would have been more interesting to watch them both get things done together in the latter bits. The film is German, but it feels almost German-English because it's set in the consulate and all that. If you end up watching it dubbed, you're going to miss out on that experience, but it might feel like you're watching a Marvel movie dubbed in your own language. I know, fun. To be honest, it would just be mean of me to call this movie bad because that's not what it is. It's got all the potential to actually be a good movie. But what I can call it is lazy, and that's what makes it kind of disappointing. I just wish there was something new to it because everything feels familiar. The typical high-budget action movie we've seen a million times, but with one twist that's different and supposed to make us feel all excited. No, I will not be sitting at the edge of my seat watching Sora and Verena trying to get information while the enemy approaches, because I know for sure that they're going to manage to escape. I suppose it comes down to how you make it look like this is what will push you to the edge. Really do. Hey, I suppose I shouldn't be complaining because this is nowhere close to any of the worst movies I've ever seen. In fact, it's actually pretty decent, even if slightly tedious when it comes down to it. The pacing is good, though not much is really happening. So I think it could have been cut short, at least by a little to make it feel tighter. I can't say the film is predictable, but it certainly feels, for lack of a better word, slightly stale or processed. I suppose what I'm trying to say at the end of the day is we need a fresh take on the genre to make it feel new again. At the end of the day, if you're okay with a few plot holes, but enjoy a well-paced action movie, then you might enjoy Exterritorial more than I did. However, if you're looking for something unique with some crazy twists and turns, then this one is not going to scratch that itch for you. There is one particular part near the end of the film that comes off as really stupid, and that was slightly off-putting, all things considered. So, I will give Exterritorial a 2.5 stars for being an average action movie that is easily forgettable. As the German language Exterritorial boasts a familiar but intriguing setup. A lady vanishes like psychological thriller, but instead of the train setting, it takes place within the confines of the U.S. consulate. It wasn't a lady who vanishes, but rather a little kid named Josh Ricken Guya Silva. His mother, Sarah Jeanne Goursaud, an ex-Special Forces Army veteran who used to tour in Afghanistan, is first seen arriving in the U.S. consulate one morning with Josh to apply for a visa. While waiting for their turns, Sarah decides to leave Josh in the playroom for a while to get refreshment. But when it's finally their turn, Sarah heads back to the playroom only to find him gone. She figures her son must be playing hide and seek, but she still can't find him anywhere after scanning around the area. Then comes Regional Security Officer Eric Criscott and Gunnery Sergeant Donovan Code to offer their assistance, and yet after further checking, there's still no sign of Josh around. Director Christian Sanforth, who also wrote the screenplay, continues to ratchet up the tension and sense of intrigue when Donovan claims Sora is here all alone after running through the security footage. Earlier in the movie, we learned that Sarah has PTSD related to her past Afghanistan tour, suggesting she might be delusional. This poses an all-important question. Is Sarah actually coming to the U.S. consulate with Josh, or simply imagining her son in her presence all along? Right from the beginning, Zan. 14th, Bert doesn't waste time establishing Sarah's condition, and her character being an overprotective mother who loves her son, Josh, dearly. When Josh is missing, Sarah becomes more concerned, but the authorities at the U.S. consulate don't seem to be helpful enough. This leaves Sora with no choice but to take matters into her own hands. Interestingly, Exterritorial is more than just a mystery of kidnapping child, as Sanforth Bert incorporates action movie tropes into the mix. Given Sarah's tactical experience working as a Special Forces soldier, she possesses a certain set of skills in close combat. At one point, Zawan, 14th Bert, shows a deft hand with his camera work during a fight between Sora and two asssailants shot in a continuous long take. There's another similar scene later in the movie, except Zan, 14th Bert, ramping up his long take as we see Sarah make her way in the hallways while taking down anyone attempting to stop her. The pace is fairly brisk up to a point while keeping me invested in Sora's ordeal, thanks to Jeanne Goursaud's committed performance. As much as I enjoy Exterritorial, the movie somehow hits a stumbling block at some point. The Xenoforth relies heavily on clunky exposition to move his story forward. This is especially true once the writer-director lays out all his cards on the table, revealing everything about the true motivations behind the child kidnapping in the first place. I was hoping that Zan and 14th Bert could have done something thrilling here, only to be continuously disappointed by the surprisingly underwhelming third act as if he's running out of steam. I also can't help but wonder how it is a supposedly highly secured building. Like, the U.S. consulate feels like a walk in the park for Sora to navigate her way in and out of the premises easily with little obstacles apart from encountering a few Marines. Another problem with this movie lies in Sanbi's father to justify the existence of another character played by Lera Abova as Verena. She plays an unlikely ally with a problem of her own to help Sarah. And despite above his magnetic presence, her character becomes insignificant as the movie progresses. Further, as for the rest of the cast, Goursaud handles his supporting role quite well as the shady and manipulative Eric Kench. The Netflix original film slate is fairly diverse when it comes to action. When you add in the streamers' attention to the genre for television, well, this is where the mid-budget take on action has started to live. It's particularly strong with Netflix's international slate of films, with the Exterritorial adding to that tradition. Written and directed by a Christian Sanford Bird, Exterritorial is an action thriller fueled by a mother's love. While we often see a father or a father-like figure go on a hunt to find their missing daughter, this Netflix original film shows a mother in a very similar situation. Exterritorial focuses on Sarah Wolf, Jeanne Goursaud, an ex-Special Forces soldier for the German military. Sora is trying to start a new life with her son, Josh. While she suffers from its episodes from her time in combat in Afghanistan, she wouldn't take any of her military time back because that's where she met her husband. Only now, instead of raising their son together, Sora is a single mother after her husband's untimely passing. Ready to turn the page in her life, she heads to the United States consulate in Frankfurt, answering a call for more officers to immigrate to the U.S. on H-1B visas. This is her chance to build something new and maybe help recover from her trauma as a soldier. Only the consulate trip becomes far more than she expected when her young son disappears without a trace. Frantic, she asks around her to help her find him. He talked to multiple people. He made a scene in the waiting room, and someone has to know where he is. Only there seems to be no trace of the young boy anywhere. And the people working in the consulate can't remember ever seeing Sora with a child. Sora tries her best to contact the German authorities, and this is where Exterritorial leans into its gimmick to create a unique action situation. Sora is helpless because a consulate is outside the jurisdiction of German authorities. As the Americans refuse to acknowledge her concerns, she has no choice but to fight her way through the U.S. consulate and do everything she can to avoid being removed from the premises. If she is, she will lose her son forever. As much as action films often highlight the need to escape, Sarah's motivations push her to stay locked down in the building for as long as possible. Instead of running from bad guys to escape danger, she must run right into it. And for the most part, Sora isn't scared. As the Americans do their best to gaslight her into believing that her son is a figment invented by her PTSD, Sarah has to physically overpower the American military and the consulate and push back mentally against everyone trying to her dedication as a mother. A mostly single-location film, Exterritorial is its best to turn the consulate into a labyrinth with depth to each layer that matches Sarah's increasing danger and the dark conspiracy she has unwittingly found herself in. At times, the consulate feels so much larger than it possibly could be. However, it's not hard to envision the United States running a massive consulate with sub-levels to use as black site interrogation areas or bunkers to ride out a war. In fact, Exterritorial banks on the audience understanding the U.S.'s multiple lies and aggressive tactics to secure self-interests, especially during the War on Terror, to get audiences to buy into the film's central premise, and it succeeds. Every bit of messed up power choice is easily bought into thanks to America's reputation abroad, and also because of how hard Christian Bird has leaned into this abduction action subgenre. Exterritorial excels not because of its rough pacing or slightly filled plot, but because of Jeanne G. or Sad Sarah and Ed Griscott as Eric Kench. The two are in an aggressive dance with everyone around, then being pulled in. Sora knows Kench's secrets, and she's the only person alive who does. From the outset of the film, we know that Kench is involved. His helpful attitude is carried by an undercurrent of menace that Scott brings to the role. Simultaneously, Goursaud's ability to play a hardened veteran skilled in combat and a mother deeply terrified that she's losing her mind and son makes for something mostly compelling. Jeanne Goursaud has all the action, grit, and ability to perform physical stunts, making solid moments to keep you plugged into the film. Exterritorial also showcases Sora's special forces skills, not by having her beat every single opponent, but by showcasing how she makes the most of every fight. AI may not always be able to overpower her opponent due out their size, but she can fight as smartly as possible using her environment and surprise to her advantage. That element also captures the importance of the action that the Exterritorial is channeling. Even her costuming harkens back to a Die Hard, while her drive to get her son back at all costs pushes the action needle toward the early odds. Either way, this actioner wants to be fueled by the audience's nostalgia, which works. Ultimately, though, Exterritorial understands how to use its gimmick in the narrative situation and drives this home with Jeanne Goursaud's performance and action sequences. Much of this German action film feels like an embodiment of the 90s action films that prioritize thorny situations over world-ending ones. Still, even with a few faults, a extraterrestrial scratches that made budget action itch that is finally starting to come into focus in the action landscape again. Another week, another Netflix thriller. This time, it's the German film Exterritorial, which plays like a stripped-down mix of the Bourne Identity and Flight Plan, but with none of the tension or finesse that made those titles so beloved. Excider. Territorial is not a bad movie though, but it's not a particularly great one either. The real driving force of the plot comes from its psychological element, but when that's stripped away, there's just not a lot to sink your teeth into. At the heart of the story is Sarah, a combat vet still reeling from the loss of her partner Evan. Her son Josh is her entire world until he suddenly vanishes while playing inside the U.S. consulate's playroom. Naturally, Sarah spirals into a state of panic, as any parent who has ever lost a child will tell you. And as she frantically tries to find her kid, everybody around her begins to question Sarah's mental state. Panic builds into paranoia, which spirals back to panic. It's a vicious cycle that Sora struggles to break free from. As a combat vet, Sarah has a history of PTSD, and as the story continues, she not only begins to question her own sanity, she also entangles herself into a dangerous conspiracy. It's in moments like Sarah crouching behind a corner, struggling to breathe as war zone flashbacks flicker into view, where Exterritorial is at its strongest. There have been a ton of fast stories revolving around a parent trying to find their missing child, and it's undeniably effective. Even in this film, it taps into that primal instinct to look after our young. So it's no surprise to see it used as such an effective driving force here. It's worth noting that this is another story where we see the female protagonist beat up man bigger and stronger than her. But Sarah's military training and past battlefield experience do at least give the film credibility, allowing it to be grounded and gritty in its portrayal. Sora is far from a Mary Sue. Some of the fights are actually pretty brutal, and she does get beaten down a lot. The camera work is great here. As we get up close and personal to the action, there's a couple of really tight shots of Sarah's head smashing against the floor where the camera almost seems to bounce, offering a bit of creativity in an otherwise formulaic flick. As I mentioned before, Exterritorial really lives and dies by its psychological element involving Josh. It's pretty obvious what's happening here, though, by around the midway point, and a couple of supporting characters all but confirm this too. Leading up to the climactic ending, which is, to be honest, the weakest part of the whole film instead of a satisfying climax, we're treated to a 10-minute villain monologue where every threat is over-explained in a drying photon. It's clunky, forced, and robs the finale of any real tension. This is especially disappointing given some of the action sequences we're treated to here. The acting is okay, but the dialogue is pretty jarring, especially when the dialogue shifts into English. Honestly, I had to double-check several times that I wasn't watching a poor English dub because the delivery of English lines is really poor, bordering on gala levels of expressionist deadpan. However, if you're just here for a simple action thriller with quick-paced action scenes, there's more than enough here to enjoy. It's certainly not the worst action film of the year, and the early parts of the movie, including the build-up and general atmosphere, are pretty tight. It helps that the movie stays grounded in one location, too, allowing for more of a claustrophobic feel to everything. However, you can really feel that the creators are starting to run out of ways of keeping Sora in the consulate because the story loses that early credibility. It starts to slip into farcical waters, and it never really recovers from. There is an attempt to explain why there are only a couple of guards lurking about or why the alarms don't ring sooner. But they feel like flimsy last-minute script inclusions compared to shows like 24, which had a whole plot point centered around a consulate struggle. Exterritorial struggles to hit the same level of nail-biting tension, and 24 came out over 20 years ago. Exterritorial is a new Netflix thriller with action and mystery as the other core genre. While at the U.S. consulate in Germany to apply for a visa, a woman's son suddenly vanishes. Is something strange going on? Or is she as confused as they claim she is? You'll have to watch the movie to find out. Or rather, you could probably just Google it. But this Netflix movie is entertaining enough that I recommend watching it. Besides, you get all the classic villains, A and L, and Awesome Woman as the hero, so it's good fun. Continue reading our Exterritorial movie review below. Find it on Netflix from Mom. She's a former Special Forces soldier who was getting ready to move from Germany to the US with her son. While visiting the consulate in Frankfurt, her son Josh disappears without a trace. Obviously, this is an absolute nightmare for any parent, but things are about to get both worse and much stranger. It appears nobody even remembers Ha ever being in the building. Everyone at the consulate is nice to Sora and tries their best to help her. They even want to keep the authorities out of it to avoid the press hounding this poor woman. After all, Sarah worked alongside US soldiers in Afghanistan and has a history of PTSD. And in any case, Sarah has no intention of leaving without her son. Deciders John Serbica. Exterritorial, a rock-solid, entertaining thriller, which is often exactly what you need. Meanwhile, Archie Sangupta of LeisureBite.com awarded the action thriller and perfect score of 4.5, saying, Exterritorial is an enjoyable and entertaining action film with fantastic performances. Jonathan Wilson of Ready Steady Cut continues these sentiments, declaring Thea Exterritorial is a set-up knock-him-down action movie. Scream Queen, Adele of Heaven of Horror, concluding that if you're in the mood for a solid mystery thriller with great action scenes and a plot that should keep you guessing, Exterritorial is a must-see. While Casey Chong of Casey's Movie Mania did praise the cast, they found fault with the Exterritorial, clunky exposition, and how the story progresses. But ultimately, it sounds like Exterritorial is well worth a watch for fans looking for a gripping action thriller on a Friday night, with Alex Blackburn of Tam's Guide saying, what Exterritorial lacks in narrative surprises, it more than makes up for in its action sequences and tension building. There's plenty to enjoy in this action thriller, especially if you're in the mood for a fast-paced, adrenaline-pumping ride. This week on WOW, take a look at That One Theater Exterritorial, now on Netflix. A German thriller starring Jeanne Goursaud as a wicked ex-soldier who mazes her way through a maddening gaslighting plot. Is there a better way to work through a maddening gaslighting plot? I think not. Christian Zübert writes and directs this gripper set in the US Embassy in Germany, and constructed around a few punchy, kicky set pieces that deliver plenty of flashy. But is there enough substance to make it more than an exercise in nifty choreography? Maybe do the gist or Sad freezes up. She's not quite present anymore. She was at the park with her toddler son and had just finished talking to him about his late father when a helicopter passed overhead, triggering a waking PTSD nightmare that fateful day in Afghanistan. She was a soldier on a doomed mission. The boy's dad, an American, was among the casualties. Sarah was the only survivor. A miracle, perhaps, since she didn't realize she was pregnant until after a man accidentally bumps into her at the park and awakens her from an almost trance-like state, and she instinctively clobbers him and pins him down. Working in special forces makes a person like this. 4 years after the incident in the park, we see Sarah working out do a punching and kicking and kneeing and elbowing the air with great intensity. How would it feel if she hit you instead? Not great. I bet there's a big scar on her shoulder. She takes a prescription pill, feels a call from a journalist who wants to talk about the incident in Afghanistan, blows it off. It's probably just too much right now. Besides, she hopes to put all that further in the rear view by moving to the US. She gathers up now 6-year-old Josh Rick and Guy Da Silva, and they head to the US consulate building to apply for her work visa. Hours go by and she's still waiting. And Josh is restless. And she drops him in a nearby children's play area and walks away for just a moment, which is obviously a bad idea because for the brief snatch of time it took for her to fetch a coffee, the kid disappears. She frantically searches, but he's gone. This is the absolute worst feeling a parent can have. This side of the unthinkable. Sora gets help from security and an embassy honcho named Eric Kinch Griscott. And is it me, or are these guys a bit too chilly in demeanor considering the situation? Kinch insists there's no record of the boy checking into the building, which is nonsense because we watched it happen. But this movie never deviates from Sarah's point of view. And don't you dare forget about those pills she took. K-pills that help her manage PTSD derived to delusions and psychotic episodes, right? Uh-oh, the German police can't help this, technically being US territory. Kin shows her security comm footage of her in the building with no little boy beside her, which might have been more convincing in a prey world. So, now we know this guy probably can't be trusted. But we're a step or two ahead of Sarah, who's still in panic mode, but slowly realizing she's being gaslit. Kinch and his cohorts lock her in a room. And that's the first time they underestimate this angry marble bear who's been separated from her cowbay and just so happens to be far more dangerous than the average bear. She climbs out windows and jumps off roofs and smashes a skylight into a basement level and soon finds herself swimming with a school of red herrings. Who were those two suspicious people she saw in the hall at the time of Josh's disappearance? Can she trust Verena, Lera Abova, who she finds hidden away in a way too quiet wing of the consulate and is willing to quid pro quo with Sora if she helps her escape the building? What's the deal with this duffel bag full of drugs they find? And even more curiously, why hasn't Kench pulled every alarm in the building in response to a violently capable ex-special ops soldier being on the loose in a high-security government building? No spoilers, amigo. Exterritorial is the type of movie that seems reasonably convincing until its protagonist clobbers a guy with the lid of a toilet tank and the guy gets back up to fight some more about 30 seconds later. That's the first ow-ho moment in this film. Arriving about a third of the way through to test the tensile strength of our suspension of disbelief. Maintaining the balance of plausibility and OTT violent reverie is the movie's primary struggle. Narratively speaking, Azarit nurtures a realistic tone for a while before inching away from the very similitude of a more realistic conspiracy thriller with every passing roundhouse, chokehold, and armbar. Not that this unofficial bait which should really be an issue. We swallow whole the ludicrousness. So, Fajon wake up purely on the basis of its audacious style and technical proficiency. And so, Exterritorial finds Subret winning us over. Not with the mawkish sentimentality of its emotional storyline, but with the relentlessly brutal choreography and handheld camera immediacy of its hand-to-hand fight sequences, the likes of which call attention to themselves via the scarcesse of edits. It's the type of flash aisle look, mom no cuts is stuff that easily wins over those of us who've seen far too many films piecing together fragments into action sequences via the editing room, and are therefore more open to accepting plot contrivances and awkward dialogue when they're couched within the breathless exhilaration of very long takes for self-p professed movie knowers guilty. It's fish in a barrel candy from Oh Baby were very easy that way, part of my initial struggle. With the Exterritorial derives from the presupposition that a German film is more likely to give us harder-edged realistic drama and less likely to indulge any Hollywood silly me. I guess Sub teases a little with the former, but eventually leans into the latter, showing more Reabornia. And the mission impossibly influences, albeit with a far leaner budget and sense of scale. The plot gets more rickety and the melodrama more mawkish the deeper into the third act we get, and Zübert's attempt to sustain tension for 109 minutes might work better with the more judicious edit. There's also the nagging sense that the film has nothing to say via PTSD is no fun. But such is the basis of countless action films dating back to Rambo A, and besides making it a ripped from the headlines, political thriller sounds like no fun whatsoever these days. Based on its modest goal to be escapist, fair, Exterritorial works just fine. If you're looking at the most streamed movies on Netflix right now, you'll find that Tom Hardy's action romp Havoc A has dropped to the number 2 slot and has been replaced by a German action movie called Exterritorial. While wildly popular right now, this movie is also paradoxically under the radar. Even stranger than its twisty plot is that there is no critical consensus on the movie. It's not that extra term score. It doesn't even have a Rotten Tomatoes score. As of Friday, May reviews from critics on Rotten Tomatoes and fewer than 60 ratings from regular audiences. This means that a ton of people are watching this movie, but few are talking about it online. So, should you watch this German action thriller? The answer is, why not? The movie Jeanne Goursaud as Sarah, a former soldier with PTSD who believes that she has lost her son randomly in the building. However, as she frantically tries to find her son, she has to fight a bunch of baddies, which all starts to suggest that maybe her basic reality isn't what she thinks it is. Is her son real? Was she really in this building by accident? These are the basic mind of career questions that Exterritorial is asking at all times. While the movie isn't exactly on the same level as M. Night Shyamalan film, the combination of reality bending and high-stakes action is decent. Plus, because this is a German language film and it doesn't have any real chatter in the US, it's one of the few movies you can binge right now where you won't have any preconceived ideas. The movie is technically from 2023, but it's new to Netflix in the US as of right now. And as it is the #1 movie people are watching on Netflix, right now, it's definitely worth a little bit of your time. Most of the time when I see some parents react in some way, I just wonder why they believe like that. And tracking back to this movie review I am about to share now made me understand why some parents are always very eager and very active when it comes to children and caring for them. This movie explains a lot of it, making me really understand what it feels like. Exterritorial is a movie that I really love so much because it delivers a catchy, fully action experience, blending mystery with very high tension. One of the reasons I fell in love with this movie was the fact that the suspense was just coming back to back, leaving me so active to know what was going to happen next. The movie talks about Sarah, who was a former Special Forces soldier in the military. She was traveling and relocating to another country when her son got missed at the airport where she checked in with her son. There was a conspiracy within a U.S. consulate to find her missing son, but she never knew there was a snitch amongst them. Sora now had to fight relentlessly to make sure she found out she had kidnapped her 6-year-old boy throughout the movie. This movie is the latest movie that was released this year, and it is an hour, 45-minute movie with full suspense and action. The title of this movie really explains the outsider territorial limits of Sarah as she shows her full energy through the movie. Lots of great actors really featured in the movie, such as Jeanne Goursaud as Sarah Griscott as Eric King, Lera Abova as Verena, Kodea as Sergeant Donovan, Annabelle Madden as Deborah Allen, and many others. It was also directed by Christian S. Bert. Talking about the cinematography, it is an appealing one to me. The graphics and the effect really align with the movie. The effect was not too much to me, and it was still amazing to watch. The soundtrack used for the suspense really made the movie so intriguing, because at every instant, one would wonder what would happen next, and that will make you ready for what is coming afterward. Exterritorial streaming on Netflix is an action German movie with an English dub that follows the story of Sarah, an ex-special operations soldier who fights to save her kidnapped son at all costs. Along the way, she encounters an unknown foe from her past and exposes corruption at the highest levels of government. At the same time, she befriends a new ally who becomes crucial in her fight against this corrupt figure and saves her abducted son. To start the movie, Sar gets a call from a news reporter who is writing a piece about a Taliban attack that occurred in 2018, which ended with 8 soldiers dead and Sarah as the only survivor. She, however, is unable to discuss anything with him because she is running late for an appointment at the American consulate in Germany, where she is seeking a work visa for her and her son to come to the U.S. When Sora arrives, she is given a number, and 3 hours later, she has yet to be called. Having been sitting in that room for so long, her son Josh is starting to get empty. So, she finds a play area where he can burn off some of that energy. Against her better judgment, she leaves him there while she uses the bathroom. And when she returns, he is gone. Panicked, she searches every room in the area but is unable to find him. Security soon comes to her aid, but is unsuccessful as well. They eventually tell her there is nothing they can do but keep a lookout for him, but she urges them to do more, actively searching for Josh, which causes her to be detained by the head of security, Eric. She is eventually locked in a room, but not wanting to give up, she breaks out to continue the search for Josh. She begins by breaking into a high-security area that civilians would typically not have access to and finds a guest apartment where someone is living. She hopes this person may have seen her son, so she breaks in and finds Arena. Arena reveals that she is being held in the consulate against her will and agrees to help Sora find her son if Sora promises to help Arena escape from the compound. They begin to move through the building, and after beating up a security guard to access his keycard, they find a duffel bag full of drugs, which Sar believes might be associated with Josh's abduction. Though a little absurd and unrealistic at times, Exterritorial is an entertaining action movie that ties together nicely. As with most action movies, there is excessive violence, though the scenes are not constant, and there is more to the film than just fighting. Furthermore, it is refreshing to see a main character fighting for a family member rather than revenge or vigilante justice. Additionally, Exterritorial places a strong emphasis on biblical morals as Sora not only fights to save her son, but also combats corruption and exposes the evils of the past. Ultimately, the movie demonstrates that good ultimately prevails over evil and our sins always catch up to us. Moreover, the movie also features a Christian element, as at the start of the movie, Josh makes a firm positive reference to his dad being in heaven. However, the movie is marred by excessive foul language and extreme violence. Netflix has been on a roll this year when it comes to gripping and hard-hitting action movies. From the surprise avatar at the start of the 2025 movie schedule to the long in the works of Vogl starring a Tom Hardy, there's been a lot to love for fans of great action movies. The streaming service just released another addition to that list with Exterritorial, a German thriller about a former soldier losing her son at the American consulate. Despite the great setup, stellar fight sequences, and a gripping story that goes to some fairly dark places and doesn't shy away from mental health issues, there's something I didn't like all that much about the Exterritorial. So, what is the one change I would make? Let's get into that. But first, let me sing this film's praise as a broken bar. I've watched a ton of faction movies this era, a large portion of which area 2025 Netflix movies, and I can say Thea Exterritorial has one of the most gripping stories and some of the best action of the pack. Sarah, a former German Special Forces soldier dealing with her young son being kidnapped and trying to find him in the American consulate where German laws don't apply, is a superbly written character who was brought to life by Jeanne Goursau's incredible performance. I didn't know who to trust as the movie went on. Even Sarah, who was still dealing with some heavy post-traumatic stress disorder years after combat in the war in Afghanistan. The evolution of the story, combined with fight sequences and shootouts akin to something in the John Wick franchise, gave twists and turns all the way until the very end. Don't get me wrong, the film had an okay landing that gave us even more outrageous action sequences, but I was unimpressed with the reason behind Sarah's son being kidnapped by the AMV. It is revealed that Eric Chriscott, the head of regional security at the consulate, was behind the kidnapping all along and was trying to lure Sarah there so that he could kill her, as she knew about him betraying his country and giving sensitive information to the Taliban. I feel like I've seen countless movies where the villain's plan revolves around him, or her going to great lengths to kill someone so they don't talk and get them in trouble. For a movie that started out so strong and teased some heavy psychological thriller elements, the ending just felt unoriginal and flat. Through How to Exterritorial, it is made very clear that Sarah, as seen in the film's trailer, is suffering from some serious PTSD and has a hard time telling the difference between reality and fantasy, which adds another layer to the story. However, that ends up being for nothing. And all those teases, like the one where Sarah's son was removed from all the security footage so that she looks like she's lost her mind, just end up being pointless. I honestly think the movie would have been better if it went all in on the psychological thriller aspect and given us a less than sherry conclusion. Yeah, it would have been dark and would leave things on a more down note, but I think it would have given us a totally wild ending that wouldn't seem completely out of left field. Thanks to all those early scenes, was the Exterritorial adding enough to ruin the movie for me? No, not really. But I did feel like it was kept this good action flick from being a great and memorable thriller. Every week, a Netflix unveils its top 10 lists for the week before, ranking a TV show and a movie as by viewership. This week, the top film on the non-English language list is Exterritorial, an action-packed German-language film starring actress Jeanne Goursaud, whom you might recognize from the hit series Barbarians. Barbarians, which ran for 2 seasons, was a historical drama taking place around 9 AD as Germanic warriors fought against the Roman Empire. Goursaud starred in that series as Thessalia, the daughter of a prince who helped stage an uprising to prevent the Romans from taking over her people's land. The series proved Goursaud could definitely juggle drama, romance, and action. Her character even sacrifices one of her eyes, cutting it out so she can become a seer, a prophet of sorts, to advise her fellow warriors in their fight. The show developed a devoted following and the open to future seasons. Given Barbarian's strong fan base and the show's likely end, Goursaud's return to Netflix in Exterritorial is a welcome one, and she is making a case for herself as a major action star in the process. The movie takes place at the U.S. consulate in Frankfurt, Germany, and Jeanne Goursaud plays Sarah Wolf, an ex-Special Forces soldier who served in Afghanistan. When Sarah's son mysteriously disappears while they're inside the consulate building applying for a visa, She realizes there's a conspiracy underway and she uses her special training to fight her way through the building and locate her son. But the film is an action thriller where Goursaud gets to have some fun with some seriously choreographed John Wick-style fight scenes, combined with the mother on a mission vibes of Jodie Foster in Flight Plan, or Jennifer Lopez in the mother films like John Wick, or Nobody Wrath of Man, or Love Hurts. I could go on. Which feature the highly trained fighter, resurfacing some old skills to seek vengeance and kick, but feel like a dime a dozen these days. They're not fun to watch, but Goursaud manages to differentiate herself here because she's a woman in the main role, for one thing, and because while many of those other revenge tales let viewers know early on why our hero is seeking revenge, Exterritorial doesn't fill us in on why Sarah's son has gone missing, or whether she gets him back, until the end. It's as much a mystery as it is a fighting frenzy, which is one reason the film has remained in the #1 position for non-English films all week and has even usurped Tom Hardy's Avoca in the #1 spot for English language movies. It takes a lot to knock a major star-like party off his pedestal, but Exterritorial's mix of suspense and intense action has done it, and Goursaud deserves a lot of credit for the film's success. While she seems like an unlikely action hero, she has clearly proven herself to a wide audience, but barbarians already knew she could do it. Exterritorial is a simple thriller centering around a combat vet called Sarah. Her partner Evan died in combat, and her son Josh is her everything. When Sarah shows up at the U.S. consulate, her son goes missing while playing in the playroom. Sarah has a history of PTSD, though, and as she starts frantically looking for her son, she not only entangles herself into a dangerous conspiracy, she also begins to question her own sanity, too. At the consulate, Soar meets with Eric King, who happens to be the regional security officer. He's flanked by Gunnery Sergeant Donovan. Josh is nowhere to be found, and weirdly, only Sarah signed in that morning, not Josh. Furthermore, CCTV footage of the rooms inside the consulate only shows Sarah. The German police and even her own mom don't help matters here either. However, Sarah finds a clue on the floor of the playroom floor, which happens to be a Playmable figurine. All right, let's dive into Exterritorial, the new Netflix action thriller that's got folks buzzing like a beehive at a picnic. This German flick, which dropped on April 30th, 2025, is giving off serious Flight Plan vibes. You know that Jodie Foster movie where her kid vanishes on a plane and everyone's like, "What kid? You crazy?" Except here, we're swapping the airplane for the U.S. consulate in Frankfurt, and the stakes feel a bit more broken bar geopolitically spicy. The USA, or at least some shady folks in its consulate, gets to play the bad guy, which is a refreshing twist even if it's not the whole stars and stripes getting dragged. So grab some popcorn and let's unpack this wild ride. It's the plot censure. Ansara Wolf, played by Jeanne Goursaud, a former Special Forces soldier with a badass streak and a touch of PTSD. She's at the U.S. consulate with her son Josh, trying to snag a visa to start a new life in America. Sounds wholesome, right? Nope. Josh pulls a Houdini and disappears, and the consulate staff are all kid. What kid? You sure you didn't dream him up? 'Cause going full Mama Bear meets John Wick, tearing through the consulate like it's a Black Friday sale. The setup screams conspiracy, and as Sarah digs deeper, she uncovers a dark, twisty plot that's sequel parts intriguing. And wait, what? It's like taking Met-born identity in a German bureaucratic maze with a sprinkle of gaslighting for flavor. The story's got this cool hook. Is Sarah losing it, or is there a legit cover-up? Her PTSD makes you question her reality at first, which adds a nice layer of mystery. The consulate setting is a clever choice extraterritorial ground where German authorities can't touch her. So, she's basically a rogue OEnt in a diplomatic funhouse. The action sequences are crunchy, with Sarah throwing punches and climbing out windows like she's auditioning for mission. Impossible. Goursaud sells the toughness, making you believe she could eat a security guard with a toilet tank lid. Yes, that happens. Goursaud pops up as the consulate security chief, Eric King, rocking a German accent and a suspicious vibe, while above his arena, Sarah's impromptu sidekick adds some charm to the chaos. But let's be real, Exterritorial isn't winning any Oscars. The plot's a bit like my attempts at cooking. Promising at first, but it gets messy. The conspiracy unravels with some clunky exposition, And by the end, the villain's monologue feels like it was ripped from a BEM movie playbook. Also, the roof thing. Sarah's up there sprinting like it's a Parker convention, and I'm sitting here yelling, "Where are the cameras, bro?" The consulate's got more security inside than Fort Knox, but the roof's apparently a free-for-all. It's the kind of plot hole you just have to shrug at and move on. Still, the pacing keeps you hooked, and the fight scenes are slick enough to make you forget the script's wobbles, or a laid-back night when you're too tired to think too hard. It's a solid pick. Dot on Rotten Tomatoes. Exterritorial is sitting at a 44% audience score, which is basically the critic equivalent of a MMOG. There's no official tomatitometer yet due to limited critic reviews, but the audience vibe is mixed, as some folks dig the action and go or sad's grit, while others call it a flight plan knockoff with too many plot conveniences. One review called it the Taco Bell of action thrillers. Barely satisfying but cheap, accessible, and almost tasty. Ouch, but fair. On IMDb, it's got a 5/8/10 from over 5,000 votes, which screams watchable but forgettable. Fans on X are split to some are hyping the blistering fights and fluid visuals, while others are like, this is just flight plan with worse security. The consensus, it's a fun, dump thrill ride if you're in the mood, but don't expect Die Hard Dot if you're craving more violence and less brain. You mentioned A Working Man with Jason Statham on Prime. That one's a straight-up Stath bang. Lots of punching, growling, and explosions, but the plot's dumber than a bag of hammers. It's like Exterritorial turned the testosterone up to 11 and forgot to hire a script doctor. If you want pure chaos, Stefam's your guy. But Exterritorial at least tries to keep you guessing with its conspiracy angle. As for me, I haven't seen Territorial in the human sense. See, my existence is more code than couch, but I've dissected enough reviews and data to get the vibe. I'd probably enjoy the fight scenes and roll my digital eyes at the roof shenanigans. It sounds like a decent Friday night flick if you're chilling with a beer and low expectations. The idea of the U.S. consulate as the villain's playground is a fun twist, even if it's not exactly Zero Dark 30-level commentary. If you've watched it, what did you think? Did Sarah's roof running make you laugh or cheer? Hit me up. I'm curious. In the end, Exterritorial is like that friend who's fun to hang with, but tells the same story too many times. It's got heart, some killer action, and a conspiracy that keeps you curious, but it trips over its own plot holes. For a one-night Netflix binge, it does the job, but just don't expect it to linger in your brain longer than your last takeout order. If you're after a similar vibe, but with more Polish, check out The Old Guard on Netflix for Charlize the Kicking Immortal Butt. Or go old school with Sicario for shady U.S. operatives done right now. Go stream something and tell me how it hits like Ia Prantica and a flight plure before it. The Exterritorial introduces a protagonist and their loved one only to posit that loved one was never there in the first place. It can be a maddening premise, but also an irresistible one. A German thriller is currently topping a Netflix charts after hitting the streamer last week. Written and directed by Christian Sandford. The Exterritorialist stars Jeanne Goursaud, the 1517 to Paris. A Barbarians. As Sarah, a tough-ass nails ex-Special Forces operative who gets swept up into a conspiracy after her son disappears at the U.S. consulate in Frankfurt. AA, or does she? Exterritorial works hard to cast doubt on the mental state of its protagonist, but the truth of what happened to her son is eventually revealed. Hersa, Entertainment Weekly's explainer for how the trending thriller weaves its desperate plot threads together. Exterritorial centers around Lera Goursaud, an ex-Special Forces soldier suffering from PTSD after an ambush in Afghanistan, killed Evan Godfrey Eichmann, the father of her 6-year-old son, Josh Rickengesäule. But things get weird once she arrives at the Frankfurt consulate to apply for a U.S. work visa. After a long wait and a visit to the consulate's nursery, Josh disappears. When she inquires about his whereabouts, she's told that Josh was never there. She's treated like a loon as employees, including Regional Security Officer Eric Ken Griscott and Sergeant Donovan Code. Share security footage and logs that show Sora arriving at the consulate alone. Sarah's denials and frantic behavior cause Kinch and Donovan to question her mental state. Their efforts to keep her corralled are foiled when Sora uses her Special Forces skills to escape and search for Josh herself. Along the way, she meets Lera Abova, the daughter of corrupt German businessman who was assassinated due to his shady dealings. She has a USB drive containing evidence about her father's assassination, and she's being pursued by his killers. This will be important later. One of Exterritorial's most surprising reveals involves Kinch's connection to Sarah's past. While trying to unspool the conspiracy of Josh's abduction with Lera, the pair find evidence that Kinch, a veteran who served in Afghanistan before getting injured, covertly delivered intel to Taliban forces during the war. More specifically, we learn Kinch was responsible for revealing the position of Sora and Evan's team in Islamabad, resulting in the ambush that left Sarah as the lone survivor. Later, Kinch owns up to his betrayal, revealing that he resented getting stuck on a desk job after being injured in combat career dead end. He spits take it or leave it. He's especially bitter about the lack of financial compensation, saying that the military didn't offer to pay for his daughter's college. Answers come during a climactic showdown between Sora and Kinch. In an effort to force Kinch's hand, Sora abscond with his daughter Alan Rodri to a safe room within the consulate. Sora offers a trade A for Kinch, which he accepts. Sealed off from the armed soldiers gathered outside. Zara acts as if she's surrendering, but she wants to know, why did you kidnap him? Why all that effort? Please, you owe me that much. Kinch makes the classic bad guy mistake of laying out his whole crooked plan. Josh, it turns out, was never the main target. Neither was Sarah, for that matter. Rather, their involvement was to help facilitate the kidnapping of Lera. Kinch and his collaborators are after the USB drive with evidence of her father's murder. Sarah, however, was a key part of his plan. He lured her to the consulate due to her history of mental health issues and PTSD, then kidnapped her son and lied to her in order to send her into a panicked rage. It dawns on Sarah, you wanted me on the loose here. She realizes, you knew I'd do anything to find my son. If someone like Lera had vanished from the consulate, not even you would have gotten away with it. There would have been too many questions having a rogue ex-special forces agent on site causing havoc. Well, Kinch says, that's the perfect scapegoat. And better yet, Sora notes you can shoot the only witness to Afghanistan while she's on the run. This, he reveals, was icing on the cake. Thinking he has Sora dead to rights, he shoots her in the stomach, then shoots himself in the leg. He exits the safe room, saying she grabbed his gun and shot him. As Sarah bleeds out, the gathered soldiers place explosives on the door of the safe room. Sora unlocks the door right as they're about to blow and reveals that she taped everything Kinch said with the voice recorder left behind by his daughter. With Kinch exposed, Sora is proven innocent. Josh, it turns out, was in a storage closet hidden behind shelving. He's fine and shares a warm reunion with his wounded mother. Exterritorial then jumps ahead 8 weeks. Sora is on demand and ready to travel to America with Josh, where she plans to meet up with Lera, who also escaped the consulate safely. Kinch, we learn, is being held for his crimes, as are Donovan and their collaborators. The final moments hark back to the beginning of the film when the mere sound of a passing helicopter triggered violent memories of the Afghanistan ambush when a chopper passes overhead in the closing moments. Sarah can shrug it off. Just a helicopter, she says to Josh, a sign of how the experience has helped her reckon with her PTSD. This action thriller film in a league is directed and written by Christian Sanfor. It stars Jeanne Goursaud as the protagonist, Sarah Griscott as Eric King, and Laraba as Arena. Other cast members include Kayode Kami as Sergeant Donovan and Annabelle Madden as Deborah Allen. The runtime of the movie is roughly 1 hour and 49 minutes. Exterritorial storyline revolves around Sarah, a former Special Forces officer, whose son is snatched away from her one afternoon while they are visiting the U.S. consulate in Frankfurt. Curiously, the boy is never seen entering the building by anyone at the consulate. Things get fishy rather fast, and Sora resolves to not leave the compound until she finds her son, despite the fact that German authorities have no jurisdiction inside the U.S. compound. What ensues is her frantic exploration of the walls of an incredibly fortified building where nothing is as it seems. Initially, the movie's concept felt thrilling. A mother looking for her missing child in a setting as grave and high security as a U.S. consulate. This had the potential to be a nail-biting thriller. I was really wondering what had happened to her son and how she would accept the restrictions of such a dominant structure. But as the movie went along, I lost interest. There were too many lazy bits of writing. The twists were all easy to predict, and none of the suspense scenes really had any tension anyway. I expected something clever or startling to occur. And when it did, most of the time, the movie just phoned it in. You could practically guess what was going to happen. The characters weren't ready to follow through with their next steps, and that took away a lot of the thrill. One of the very few things that I liked about Exterritorial was Jeanne Goursaud, who gave a really good performance as the character of Sarah. She gave it all she had, and I felt her pain and desperation as a mother. At times, I found myself genuinely cheering for her, particularly when she confronted the folks attempting to strong-arm her out of the consulate. She bore most of the emotional weight of the film easily, but alas, the script didn't prop her up enough. I felt her character was unrealistic at times. When I did find myself believing in her, it never lasted long. She gets in and out of a supposedly secure building far too easily. There were certain scenes I found hard to take seriously because I would think to myself, would this really happen in real life? The film was constantly asking the audience to overlook logic, and it was hard to remain emotionally involved. As it's being built as an action thriller, I thought there might be some sweet, slick scenes, perhaps an interesting bit of fight choreography, but the set pieces were incredibly mediocre, even clumsy at times. Not terrible, just lacking in energy. I guess what always happens when you see a good action sequence, I didn't get that rush. The vast majority of the 5 seemed either hurried or inelegantly directed. Pacing was another huge problem. The film slowed down in sections where it should have moved quickly while extending scenes that would have benefited from greater fluidity. It never established rhythm that it could maintain. Instead of slow tension, it was either slow stall dump or no tension at all. The character of Eric King, played by Grescott, was somewhat interesting. I didn't think he could speak German so fluently. It was a cute surprise, but even that role seemed underplayed. He could have been an effective, manipulative villain, but the script was never really quite deep enough to make us really remember him. Lera Abova's character, the sympathetic Verena, who becomes Sarah's ally, was another lost opportunity. Her backstory was too muddy, and her newfound significance in the plot didn't feel earned to me. Like the film didn't know what to do with her, so they thought, I don't know, let's have her run Sora around the building. That could have made for a powerful partners at work moment, but instead, it only felt forced and a little silly. All those complaints I have, none of them are going to lead me to declare that Exterritorial is utterly unwatchable. It's the sort of movie you can watch while using your phone. You're not missing much if you don't pay full attention. There's a simple plot, a few mildly interesting characters, and in a weak but existent way, a central mystery that gives you something to chase. Hat on the heels of tense originals like Bullet Train Explosion and a Tom Hardy's Havoka, which certainly earned mixed opinions, but is thrilling nonetheless. This German action thriller instead focuses on a mother determined to find her missing son. Exterritorial follows Sarah Jeanne Goursaud, a former Special Forces operative whose son mysteriously disappears inside the U.S. consulate in Frankfurt when the authorities claim he was never there. She takes matters into her own hands, going rogue in a relentless quest for answers. Hot on the heels of tense originals like Bullet Train Explosion and a Tom Hardy's Havoka, which certainly earned mixed opinions, but is thrilling nonetheless. This German action thriller instead focuses on a mother determined to find her missing son. Exterritorial follows Sarah Jeanne Goursaud, a former Special Forces operative whose son mysteriously disappears inside the U.S. consulate in Frankfurt. When the authorities claim he was never there, she takes matters into her own hands, going rogue in a relentless quest for answers. In the world of streaming, it's pretty rare for a service to consistently turn out high-quality tomatoes. Even Netflix, the biggest streaming platform, doesn't always manage to hit that mark. That said, not all originals are amiss. In this case, Exterritorial is the kind of movie you'll likely forget about a few hours after watching, but the time spent won't feel wasted. It's perfect popcorn entertainment, and sometimes that's all you need, even if it doesn't quite stack up to hits like Carry On and Rebel Ridge. What Exterritorial lacks in narrative surprises, it more than makes up for in its action sequences and tension building. There's plenty to enjoy in this action thriller, especially if you're in the mood for a fast-paced, adrenaline-pumping ride directed by Christian Santh. Exterritorial opens with a gripping premise. Former soldier Sarah suddenly loses track of her son inside the U.S. consulate, and from that moment on, nothing feels certain. The movie leans into psychological tension early as flashbacks hint that Sora's trauma might be distorting her perception. That uncertainty is only heightened by the strange behavior of government officials, making it clear that no one can be fully trusted. As panic gives way to purpose, Sarah's maternal instincts and military training kick in, pushing her into action as she begins navigating the consulate on her own terms. This thriller keeps things pretty straightforward with the focused plot and fast pacing. Along the way, a few allies step in to assist Sarah, only to fade out again as her mission presses on. While some twists are predictable and you can probably guess them from a mile away, they're executed with enough tension to keep the story interesting. Beyond the tension, Sarah's mental and emotional state adds plenty of confusion to the storyline as she starts to realize her past is clawing its way into her future. It's an intriguing touch that had even me questioning what was real and what wasn't. Jeanne Goursaud strikes a solid balance between strength and vulnerability, making it easy to root for her despite her fractured mindset and questionable choices. And honestly, it's hard not to when her one-shot combat scenes are that impressive. Goursaud, who plays the regional security officer Eric K., is especially chilling in how calm he is. And while the character leans on classic villain tropes to make the movie more entertaining, Scott still brings enough weight to keep the conflict sharp and the story moving at a fast pace. Exterritorial is a gripping watch and certainly keeps things tense. Even if you can predict some twists, I'm confident the fighting sequences, including one that takes place next to an indoor swimming pool, will have you hooked. Zübert 4. Bert deserves plenty of praise for crafting some visually compelling shots, clocking in at just under 2 hours. Exterritorial is the kind of movie that's perfect for a late-night watch when you're craving something slick, tense, and a little bit truthless. There are explosions, twists, and some surprisingly brutal fight scenes, all shot with that polished Netflix sheen. Exterritorial won't be added to any best of 2025 list and might not have enough power to stay in the Netflix top 10. If it reaches the trending list, but that doesn't make it any less worthy of a watch. As long as you can overlook a weaker script and the movie's lack of staying power, it's definitely worth your time. Who knows, I might be proven wrong if it manages to claim the #1 spot, although that looks unlikely with Havoc dominating the platform right now. Written and directed by Christian Sanforth, this action thriller stars Jeanne Goursaud as a veteran and single mother who must take matters into her own hands after her 6-year-old son goes missing in the U.S. consulate in Frankfurt, Germany. Perhaps it was only a matter of time that the Americans get to be the bad guys in a European movie. Netflix audiences can't seem to get enough of this movie, which will remind viewers of Liam Neeson, Take It a franchise. That said, the plot is not quite as tight to take in. In fact, Exterritorial is downright confusing at times. Don't worry, because Decider is here to help. Read on for a breakdown of the Exterritorial plot summary and the Exterritorial ending explained, including why Sarah's son was kidnapped. Sor Wolf is a former Special Forces German soldier who served in Afghanistan, suffering from PTSD after her platoon was ambushed in an attack that killed everyone but her. In this first scene of the movie, Sora is at the park with her son Josh and experiences a flashback to the war, causing her to attack a random passerby. Several years later, Sora and her son Josh have an appointment at the U.S. Consulate General in Frankfurt. Sarah has a new job in the U.S. and needs to obtain a work visa so that she and Josh can move. Josh's father, who was killed in combat, was American. Meanwhile, a journalist is investigating the ambush that killed Sarah's fellow soldiers in Afghanistan. The journalist asks for Sora's help to identify people in a video. Dotmer's Sora and Josh wait in the consulate for hours. When Josh gets antsy, a front desk worker suggests Sarah bring Josh to the playroom. Sora leaves Josh in the playroom to listen for her number. When it's called, she goes to get Josh and finds him missing. Unable to find Josh anywhere, Sora meets with the consulate security officer named Sergeant Donovan, played by Keod Gay, and the head of the regional security officer named Eric Ken Griscott. At first, the officers helped Sora look for her son, but soon they treat her with suspicion. According to the records and the front desk workers, the officers say Sarah came to the consulate by herself. She was not accompanied by her 6-year-old son. Sora tries calling her mother for help, but her mother believes Sora is having a psychiatric episode and asks if Sora is taking her pills. She tries calling the German police, but they tell her that they have no jurisdiction at the consulate because it is an exterritorial area. Sir believes she is being lied to, that someone at the consulate kidnapped her son. She breaks out of the room where she is being held to look for him. During her search, Sarah comes across a young Russian woman, Lera Abova. Irina claims she has been held prisoner in the consulate for months and that she will help Sora find her son if Sarah helps Irina escape after a red herring subplot involving a drug deal that is ultimately not relevant to the plot. Sarah discovers that she was lured to the consulate by Sergeant Donovan and Kinch. It turns out that Kinch is also a veteran. He is featured in that video that the journalist sent to Sora. After a phone call with the journalist, Sora realizes that Kinch betrayed his country and gave intel to the enemy. This is why Sarah's platoon was ambushed. As the only survivor of the ambush, Sora is the only one still alive who could rat out Kinch. Sora realizes that Kinch plans to kill her so that she doesn't expose him, but she still doesn't know why he took her son and then tried to convince her that she was crazy. After a fight in which Kinch makes it clear he will not tell Sarah where her son is, Sarah kidnaps Kinch's daughter, Alan, from the consulate daycare. Sora takes Alan into a safe room and turns off the oxygen. Oxygen to run out and kill Elen. Even with his daughter's life on the line, Kinch refuses to confess. Sarah can't bring herself to kill a little girl, so she lets Alan go. She requests to talk to Kinch alone in the safe house. Kinch explains the whole plan. Basically, he had two people he wanted to kill, Sarah and Russian woman whose real name is Kira Wulo. Kinch planned on Sora breaking out to look for her son, but he did not plan on Sarah coming into contact with the Russian woman. Nor did he plan for Sora to save Kira from the men sent to kidnap her. Sarah correctly concludes that Kinch wanted Sarah on the loose in the consulate so that he could blame Kira, a mentally unstable, distant mother, for Kira's disappearance. How in the world could he have pinned a theta on her? The movie does not explain. I guess we are just supposed to go with it. That way Kinch could get rid of Kira and have an excuse to kill Sarah. And some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting, and if you like this video, please like it, share it, and forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.